Hello everyone, Sanli here and welcome back to another Bedrock Edition tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to find chunks and chunk borders in your Bedrock Edition worlds. This is actually a very simple process, especially for survival mode. So in today's tutorial I'll be showing you 10 very simple and straightforward methods. This is actually a very important skill to have and a very important thing to do for your survival builds, especially on Bedrock Edition, where the super low simulation distance means that just by casually walking around your world, you will be unloading a ton of different chunks around you. If you're building anything technical, any form of farm, contraption, or redstone machine, you will want to chunk align it. If half of your farm or contraption is unloaded, and the other half is in loaded chunks running and functioning, that can completely destroy almost every redstone contraption there is. So again, you want to chunk align. This will save you so much hassle and so much pain, and prevent you from having to rebuild all of your redstone. By the way, for this tutorial, I'm kind of assuming that you know what a Minecraft chunk is, but if you don't, then I'll have a wiki article linked down below. I would highly suggest that you read this. There is lots of very good, very fascinating information in here that you should definitely know. Chunks are an extremely important part of Minecraft. It's how the entire world is broken up, and the more that you know about them, the better. This tutorial is actually highly requested by so many different people. I've just never made one because, well, there's about a million billion different ways to find chunk borders on Bedrock Edition, and every single time I do a tutorial where you need to chunk align something, I always just say go to YouTube. There's a billion different ways, and this is me proving it. There's 11 different methods in this video, and they all work extremely well for your convenience, so let's hop into it. The first method is the most convenient, easiest, and most straightforward, and one that you will see in a lot of my tutorials, especially farms and truly Bedrock. And this is just a resource pack that shows the literal chunk borders in your Minecraft world. As you can see, we have red and blue lines, and we also have green lines for sub-chunk borders, which you do not need to worry about, but they are there. And this is an extremely convenient method. However, it only works for mobile devices and PCs, so that is mildly unfortunate. And also, you may not be able to use this if you play on a multiplayer world, simply because some multiplayer worlds have locked resource packs. So it's not going to work for everyone, but for those of you who does work for, it is the most convenient thing in the world, and there's a download link for this resource pack in the description of the video. You simply enable it, and then bam, you got chunk borders literally everywhere, and I cannot describe to you how useful this is. This next method works for any Minecraft world as long as you have coordinates enabled. Again, coordinates can be enabled in pure vanilla survival. All you need to do is run the command game rule show coordinates true, and that works in any survival mode world as long as you are the owner or an admin. So what you need to do for this one is grab your coordinates. In our case, that is 1855 by 118. And now we're going to go to the Chunkbase website. Once you're on the Chunkbase website, simply go ahead and click on the Apps tab, scroll down to the Biome Finder, and then scroll down a little bit more and make sure that you are on the Bedrock Edition setting, and none of the other settings will work for you. Go ahead and put in your coordinates for where you're standing in your Minecraft world, hit go, and you don't even need to worry about your world seed. The chunk borders are the same for every world. Go ahead and zoom in, and as you can see, we're actually standing pretty much right on a chunk border, but if you hover over any of these chunks, it'll actually show you the exact coordinates of those chunks right here in the lower right hand corner. So as you can see, it says from 1840 112 to 1855 127. So if you place a block on each of those two corners, that'll be one chunk marked out in your Minecraft world. And there we go, we've marked out the two corners from Chunkbase. So now if we go ahead and connect these corners together, you'll see that we have ourselves a 16 by 16 square, and that is our first chunk. And as you can see, we have a perfect 16 by 16 area marked out. This is a perfect chunk. Chunkbase is very accurate, and honestly, I would highly recommend Chunkbase for all of your Minecraft seed finding needs. It is extremely reliable, and I've been using it for years. There's a link to Chunkbase in the description of the video. Our next method works very, very well if you have a body of water around you, and if you're playing on a lower render distance. If you're playing on a very high render distance, like, oh, I don't know, 80 chunk or something ridiculous like that, then this won't work as well for you. However, for this one, we're going to be using water lines. You might not notice it, but water actually has rendering lines, and the higher your render distance, the further away these rendering lines are. As you can see, they are right there. It's pretty subtle, but if you got a good eye, you can notice them. So those are all on chunk borders, of course, and we're going to be using those to find a chunk border. For this method, what you want to do is set up a couple of bars of alternating blocks, preferably all different colors so that you can see them pretty easily from a distance. And what I did is I just set up a corner. Each of these arms is more than 16 blocks long, that way it guaranteed passes a chunk border. So now we're going to go pretty far away. You can either pillar up or use an elytra or whatever you want. And as you can see, from those water lines, they're going right across our bar. It might be kind of difficult for you to see exactly where those water lines are, but if we lower our FOV, we essentially zoom in, and as you can see, there's a water line or a chunk border right there, right after the third smooth stone. And then for this arm, we have to go past the 5th bit of smooth stone to get a chunk border. If we go down there now and connect up those two lines, that'll give us the corner of a chunk, and of course that's going to be a 16 by 16 area, so it's pretty straightforward to mark out. Once you've marked out a chunk, you can double check it with the water lines just to make sure, and as you can see, if we move around just a little bit, those water lines line up perfectly with the square that we just marked out. So that is officially one chunk. Our next method is the leaf method, and this one is significantly easier and much smaller scale as well. So basically, you want to make a nice corner of leaves, about 20 blocks in each direction. Again, that way it guaranteed crosses a chunk border. We're going to go off to this corner of our arm right here, go into settings, go to video settings, and simply turn off fancy leaves. Now, whenever you start a block update, that's going to update a ton of leaves. However, there's going to be a gap. As you can see, we have the basic leaves, very ugly, and then we have the fancy leaves, and yes, that is a chunk border, but it's also going to give you an X-ray. Don't abuse it. Come on, be a nice person. Anyway, we know that this is a chunk border. We're going to go ahead and mine out this line of blocks, going about 20 blocks in this direction right here. That way, again, it marks out and goes across a chunk border. So now we need to do that one more time. We're going to update all of these ones, make sure they're all good to go. Now we're going to go back into settings, go into video settings, and turn fancy leaves back on. Now when we update this, that'll update all of those ones to fancy leaves, and then we might need to update this arm again, so update that, and that'll leave you with another chunk border. What you can do from here is go ahead and connect that up to this side, and bam, look at that, you now have a chunk. So mark out your 16 by 16 square, and you are good to go. And there you go, you now have your first chunk marked out, looking very good. It's actually a very easy and straightforward method. Shouldn't take you more than a couple minutes to mark out your first chunk. Also, something kind of funny, as I was experimenting with this X-ray, there's legitimately a spawner right there, so there's something funny for you. That was not planned at all, but yeah, there's legit a spawner right there. And next up, we're going to be using the very reliable method of a locator map. So locator maps and all maps in the game are actually chunk aligned, which is very convenient. And of course, when you place down a block on the surface, the map will update and show you those blocks, which is pretty awesome. So what you want to do is you want to grab a couple different colors of blocks and then go to one of the corners of your locator map. As you can see, we're in the southeast corner. What you want to do is make a, basically a line of blocks going towards one of the borders, and then once your map stops rendering that line of blocks, you know you've hit the border. So that is the final block that should render in the corner of our map. If we place down a different colored block, then it should not render that. If we replace that block with a different colored block, then it should render that, and that's how you know we've hit the edge. This right here is a chunk border, so now we're going to start going towards the next closest map border. We're going to have to move around a little bit, but yeah, if we just keep going 1 or 2 blocks at a time, we will pretty quickly see where the actual map stops rendering, and it should be right about there. If we place down a different colored block, that is not going to render on our map. If we replace that one, then it will render on our map. And there you go, a very simple and easy process of finding chunk borders. We now know that this right here is the corner of a chunk, and we can mark out our 16 by 16 area. And just to confirm with our resource pack, that is of course a chunk border, so as you can see, it's a reliable method, if not a little bit convoluted. And next up we have the old but reliable redstone lamp method. So for this, all you need to do is set up a very simple redstone clock with a redstone lamp, just like so. That is going to basically turn the lamp on and off, and then as you walk far away, you will eventually cross a chunk border and that system will stop. So if we keep on going, we should see that turn off eventually. There we go, it's finally stopped. So as we slowly approach that, we will eventually cross a chunk border, which is looking to be right about there. So this right here is a chunk border. If we go onto this block, the system is on. If we go onto this block, the system is off. So great, we now know where one chunk border is, and that is right there. Now we need to go to the side by about 32 blocks. So let's keep on walking this way a little ways and then start looking at that redstone lamp. You should see it turn off and then slowly walk back to where you came and you'll see it turn back on again. So right here is our next chunk border. And once you've figured that out, you now know that this right here is the corner of a chunk, and you can go ahead and mark that out. Now, I do want to mention that if you're playing on a very large simulation distance, or really anything higher than 4 chunks, this method might not be as reliable for you, so just keep that in mind. But as you can see, this is actually chunk aligned. If we go ahead and we back up this way, it's unloaded. If we go ahead and back up to this way, it's also unloaded. So that's how you know you got yourself a chunk border. All right, sure, redstone lamps are pretty cool and technical, but let's get high tech and use a flying machine to find our chunk borders. Whenever a flying machine hits a chunk border, it will of course stop flying, and we can use that to our advantage. What you want to do is go up into the air and use a flying machine to basically find your chunk borders. We're going to set down a piston facing the direction that we want our flying machine to go. It's a temporary block behind your piston, and observer facing backwards right there. Slime block in front of your piston, sticky piston facing backwards, slime block right there, temporary block, and then an observer. Now that's going to start flying, and as soon as that starts flying, you want to stay still. Do not move a single block and just wait a couple minutes for that to go and hit a chunk border. And it looks like our flying machine has finally stopped flying, meaning that it hit an unloaded chunk, and now we're free to go ahead and approach that. So with this particular machine, the chunk border will be right here on the face of that piston. So if we grab ourselves some marker blocks, we now know that this right here is a chunk border. Now you just need to repeat that process going in this direction. You'll find yourself another chunk border, and then you can line these up. Throwing on the chunk border resource pack, as you can see, there is indeed a chunk border right on the face of that sticky piston, and I've tested this a whole bunch of times just to make sure that it's reliable for your faces. So yeah, as you can see, with this flying machine, they always break in the same way when crossing an unloaded chunk. So what if nothing else in this video has worked for you thus far? Well, do not fear, there is always a solution. And our solution, if nothing else in this video has worked for you, is to find yourself some broken structures. Whenever you load a structure in one update, but it's only like partially loaded, and then you update to another update, you will oftentimes get houses or trees that are cut in half. So as you can see, this poor villager's house is just completely cut in half, and this is how you know that you have a chunk border right here between these two blocks. So now you just need to find like a tree or something to line that up with, or another house, and you know that in fact this right here will be a chunk border, and then you can go ahead and start marking out your 16 by 16 area. It's a super gimmicky way, but you know what? It works. Our next method is a little bit less precise, but kind of like the funnest one. And basically what you need to do is you need to go find anywhere that you've AFK'd for a long amount of time, and then just go off and find where all of the mobs have built up in your unloaded chunks. It's not a terribly difficult thing to find. All you need to do is look for mass mob buildups, and this is due to the lack of despawning in Bedrock Edition. As you can see, it's not like a perfect way of finding a chunk border, but you know chunk borders are around there somewhere, so I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're perfect after all, and you're a beautifully smart person. Our final method for today will be using math to find chunk borders. Wait, don't click off the video yet. It's actually very easy if you can figure this out in your big brain. Anyway, so if you have coordinates enabled, you can of course see where you're standing in your Minecraft world, and all you need to do is take your coordinates and divide them by 16. If you get a whole number with no decimals or fractions or whatever you call it, if you get a whole number, then you know that you're on a chunk border. And then you can do some more math and figure out the other chunk borders and the corners of chunks. Keep in mind that 0, 0 is right on the corner of a chunk. So when you're dividing positive coordinates, it'll be different than when you're dividing negative coordinates. It gets a little bit complicated, but if you're big brain, smart person, scientist, you'll figure it out. And that is 10 different ways to find chunks and chunk borders in your Minecraft Bedrock Edition worlds. I hope that this video has been useful to you. If you have any weird, quirky, interesting, or different ways to find chunk borders in Bedrock Edition, then of course let us know in the comment sections down below. I really searched my brain and searched the internet for these 10 different ways, so I hope you found it useful and entertaining. If you did enjoy this video, then of course make sure to leave a like, as it helps out the video and the channel significantly. If you are new here, then of course make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future tutorials like this on the channel, and I'll see you all down in the comment section and in the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and then there was silence.